Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I am here with someone I met for the first time at the RMAI conference back in February this year, Katie Zugsay, who's with Finexus. How you doing today, Katie?
Awesome. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. I really appreciate you coming on. For those that are not familiar with you, I know I met you for the first time at RMAI this year. Can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Sure. So I'm a lawyer. I started my career that way, and I just almost pretty much out of law school, I went straight in-house to a collection agency and kind of cut my teeth as a lawyer that way. And it was just amazing to learn so much about the industry and just to see how it works. And from there, I was recruited to one of the largest insurance agencies in the country, and I was able to learn from and leverage my legal experience to be able to speak with the lawyers in one of their biggest clients and publicly traded clients. Speak with their lawyers on their end about insurance and help them to understand what their policies said and what they have access to through their policies and how their policies work, and then also to track their claims, to make sure that related claims are put together and with only one deductible, et cetera. So yeah, just learned a lot about very sophisticated insurance services. And in the process, I would just thought, I would love it if the collection space had something like this. This is a level of insurance that we don't get to see in the collection space, unfortunately. And it's not, it's not discriminatory or anything like that. It's a function of not understanding the industry. So these insurance brokers deeply understood their client's industry, and that made all the difference. They were involved and they were a business partner with their client every step of the way, almost every day of the week, pretty much, and making their business run smoother, making their litigation easier, just helping in every way. And I thought, how wonderful if we could have experienced that, in my past life as a chief compliance officer and general counsel at a collection agency. I felt like we were constantly kind of feeling around in the dark in terms of insurance. And then I loved just digging into these policies, even for banks, et cetera, and just finding out, like, you've got some money on the table here in your own policy. Did you know that? And they're really excited to hear about that. Like, no, I didn't realize that. Yeah, if you run into a regulatory issue, you have no deductible. If you choose to use this money, there's money here for you that you've paid for. If you choose to use it. And of course, that's a business decision, et cetera. But that is very rewarding for me as a lawyer who likes to help people, just to understand how to do business better. And as an entrepreneur, I, of course, appreciate the value of telling business owners what opportunities are there for them, and just how to navigate tricky situations that they can't navigate themselves otherwise.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like you are in a unique position here to help translate. So for those that are not familiar with your organization, can you tell us what you do at Finexus?
Yeah, so a common misconception is that we're an insurance carrier, and we're not. So we're insurance brokers. So I work with a specialized team of brokers that reach out to a multitude of different carriers on my client's behalf to obtain quotes. And it's for property and casualty, so errors and omissions, general liability, cyber insurance, of course, workers' comp, et cetera. So.
Awesome. Well, I think they might think you're a carrier because you got a cool name. That's probably got something to do with it, right? You get a nice short name and people tend to think of a larger organization with a well thought out.
Maybe, yeah. Well, it's actually strategic. The way I picked the name, it's just the fusion of financial services and a nexus, because I've set out to be a nexus between two financial services industries, the collection space and insurance. And so that is 100% what my focus always has been. And that's to bring insurance to collections and collections to insurance and help them understand each other, because they're two industries that need each other, but they don't understand each other. And they're a little afraid of each other, and they don't like to talk too much. um, but they need to, we need to have conversations. We need to educate each other on, what we can do for each other. And the more education there is, the more communication there is, the better generally.
Sure. And that actually makes a lot of sense, but it kind of brings me to my first question, right? Like during your intro, you had kind of made a comment about like, we have all this insurance, we have all of this insurance, we pay all of this money for it, but we don't know what's inside it. And I don't disagree with that statement, being invested in a number of different businesses. I have all kinds of insurance policies. I have no idea what they are. They're just, to me, they're mostly just a sunk cost. So how can I go back, look at my insurance policies and better understand what the value is? Is that, independent brokers, or can you provide me with some like insight or tips on like what I can go pull out of my computer and take a better look at this and maybe have a deeper understanding of what I purchased?
Yeah, this is what I love to do. I love to help people understand this, because I hate being dependent on, I hate taking my car to the mechanic and just being completely blind and dependent on what they tell me.
Mhm.
And their expertise is all I have. And I'm not comfortable with that. And so I love to empower people with this information. So yes, when you look at your own insurance policy, even not understanding the language entirely, feel free to ask your broker to help translate, or you can even Google these terms. But a great strategy for breaking down and understanding what's in your policy is actually to start at the end, like
Okay.
and read it backwards somewhat. So you start with the endorsements, and that's usually at the very end of your policy, but that's what changes everything. That's the endorsements are the addendums to your policy. And
Mhm.
so if you read it like you would a normal contract, start to finish, everything that you think about this policy is subject to change at the very end. Oh, actually, no, you don't have this, and no, substitute this for this. And it will scramble your brains and make you just want to walk away. And it's so frustrating to get to the very end, and you're like, I'm in the home stretch, and I understand now. I have a solid understanding of what I do have, what I don't have. All right, I'm navigating. I'm like synthesizing this in my brain, analyzing. I got it, and then you reach the very end and you're like, oh no, you don't have any privacy coverage at all, or you don't have any of this. You've actually got a ton of this. Everything that you thought you didn't have, you actually have, but not this. And so then you got to go back and understand, well, then how does that interact with this and that? So save yourself the trouble. You can read the policy one time this way, rather than having to go back and forth and toggle and get whipsawed with the details.
So we're going to avoid policy whiplash, right? The going back and forth. That's actually a really interesting tip, right? Start at the back and work your way forward, because if all the modifiers are at the back, better to know what's been modified prior to reading, and then at least you can kind of use that as a reference as you go through the full document. Very interesting approach to all of that. So like, and you also talked a little bit about kind of being that nexus between these two worlds. And I know that there's been a lot of challenges, whether it be cyber insurance or really look at any accountant trying to understand our industry, and the depreciation of portfolios and those things is obviously a very complex beast, right? And requires the industry to explain. So, how you're kind of sitting in between these two worlds and helping the insurance company understand, what is needed and what like explain how you sit at the center of these two worlds, what you do in that space.
Yeah. So oftentimes collection agencies understand that they're misunderstood. And so knowing that, they're scared to um, rock the boat with who they understand is probably a skittish carrier anyway. And they're just afraid to even make waves. They're afraid to speak up or tip off the carrier with regard to anything. They just want to lay low and just take the coverage because it's it's what they needed, and then just stay silent. Whereas the better thing is to educate the underwriters up front during the renewal, during the application process, and let them know, teach them about their client, all of the investment, especially now, with people are investing so heavily in compliance. You have to now
Mhm.
with Reg F and with the Hunstein litigation that's all over the place, and you have to shore up some protections there, and in
Mhm.
order to kind of keep going, and navigate these treacherous waters. And so most companies, I would say, have already made a significant investment in compliance. I know, because I was a chief compliance officer. I know the burden that is. I had a front row seat to the burden that compliance is on a
Okay.
company, on a great company that just wants to do right. It costs so much money to do that. Let the insurance broker know. In my position, I let the underwriter know. I gather that information. What are you doing, with regard to these? What investments have you made in the last year? And then I ask, I ask a myriad of other questions, just to really understand the picture I'm going to paint to that underwriter, so that they don't have to pay twice. Like collection agencies, typically, if their broker doesn't understand the right questions to ask with regard to their industry, doesn't understand their industry enough to know what to ask, then the underwriter won't know either. And so all the underwriter will know is what's in the application, which is not very much. It's not very much information. But
Mhm.
on the other hand, I think it's maybe excessive to ask for policies and procedures, and because that can be so onerous to a business owner sometimes at renewal sometimes. But anyway, so that's what insurance or that's what collection agencies and their brokers can be doing to help themselves, to situate themselves better for the best value in their insurance policy. And then on the insurance side, just educating them with regard to the collection space, and then educating the collection agency with regard to what they need. And oftentimes what they think they need may not still be what they need. So in terms of limits, oftentimes they may have a really high limit that they've always had for a number of years, and they just don't even question, well, we just have to have $5 million in limit.
Mhm.
And it's good to ask why. Why do you need that? Do you still have that client that was requiring that? If you don't have that client, maybe you don't need that, for your business. Or are the deductibles where they need to be? Let's look at your litigation and see, where they usually fall, and really customize it for the collection agency.
That also makes a lot of sense, right? So you're kind of sitting in between there and doing those evaluations and translating the two languages, right? You're translating finance and insurance, and kind of bringing those parties together. That can't be an easy process. And I think insurance, really in this industry has been driven by the requirements from the creditors or the CFPB or the RMAI certification program or whatever other requirement is out there in front of them, because otherwise I don't know that they'd be carrying a $5 million, cyber liability policy, and whether or not they have the right kind of coverage. And honestly, I think that even a lot of the auditors that are auditing, whether it be from creditors or whatever, are not entirely sure of policy, which is why they're only looking at declarations pages, right? Like they're looking at one page to verify that you have this insurance. Now, I'm sure there's a lot that I can learn from that one page. If I'm auditing somebody and I'm looking at that, are there any insights that I can gain from that particular document?
Oh, sure. Yeah, the declarations page is kind of like your cheat sheet.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's graciously, it's usually toward the beginning. It's frustrating when it's not, but it usually should be toward the beginning. It's kind of like your short list, or your cheat sheet of what you have. It should list, the premium, the limits, any sub limits. Um, Not always does it list all the sublimits. Sometimes you got to go to the endorsements to see more details about sublimits, but it should give you the rundown of what you got, and the policy number, et cetera. So that's a good sort of outline of what it contains.
Okay, so that's it's kind of like your 50,000 foot view of the document, and then here's the actual
Yes.
coverages that you have in your full policy. Um, that's an interesting approach. As we kind of come up on our time here, is there anything else that you'd like to tell the ARM industry about insurance, and any other tips that you could provide to us that might be insightful for our viewers and listeners?
Yeah, I would say just look, look through your policy as best you can and really pick the brain of your insurance broker to find out if if what you have is really what you need. If you can trim it back, or if your broker, or I say, and make sure that your broker understands the investments that you've made, and understands your business. If they don't understand your industry, they won't know what questions to ask you, and then it will be up to you to tell them what story to tell the underwriter. But it is critical. Don't pay for insurance as if you have no compliance in place, which is kind of what you might be doing, because underwriters don't know what questions to ask, so they will just assume that all collection agencies are somewhat dirty, somewhat on that spectrum of icky, and they're bracing themselves for a high activity, a lot of claims, and they price it accordingly. And so if they're afraid of you, they're going to charge more. And so just let them know, the things that you've done to make yourself less of a risk. They need to know that, and they really appreciate that. They really appreciate knowing, because their business is writing more policies, writing bigger coverages, and getting more market share. What they don't want is more risk. So if you can show them, so if you can show them you're not a risk, you're one of the good guys, here's why, and you've got a broker that can articulate that, then you're just in the best possible position insurance wise.
That's great information. Actually, I really learned a lot from today's discussion, Katie. I appreciate you coming on. I hope that you will continue to provide me with some updates, and maybe we can do another one of these again in the future. For those of you that are listening or watching, if you'd like to ask us some questions, you'd like to get some responses, you can leave comments and questions here on LinkedIn or YouTube in the comments below, and Katie and I'd be happy to respond to those. Or if you have any additional topics that you'd like to see us discuss, you can leave those in the comments as well. And we're happy to continue creating great content for the receivables management industry. Katie, looking forward to seeing you again at an upcoming conference. I'm sure our paths will cross again in person. And thank you so much for taking the time to come on and chat with me today.
It was my pleasure. Yeah, I'm a big fan of your show, so thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'll see you again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.